I'm delighted you joined today's ESPC community webinar. Today I'm joined by Matthias, MVP, who will cover Agentic development for Power BI. We love hearing what you guys have to say, so remember join conversation about today's webinar and more on X. Our handle is @ESPC_community and our hashtag is #ESPC26. Tweet us, tag us, and tell us what you learned. Don't forget to check out our Learning Hub, which updates the latest blogs, ebooks, webinars, and how-to videos. You can access and view the Learning Hub by visiting espc.tech and clicking the Learning Hub at the top of the page. Don't let the learning stop here. Continue to keep up and stay ahead by joining us for our next webinar, Breaking the Limits of Native Power BI Visuals, live demo. This will take place today, Friday, July 17th at 4 p.m. CEST. To register, visit www.espc.tech/Learning Hub Content Weeks, Microsoft Fabric Week. Time's ticking. Your future network is waiting. Don't miss the conversations, insights, and opportunities everyone will be talking about long after the event ends. Secure your place today and be in the room where it happens. Save €300 with code Fabric Week when you book your ticket. Before you switch on your out of office, make one last smart move. Secure your place at FabCon SQLCon Europe in Barcelona and take advantage of our early bird rates. Book by the 31st of July to lock in early bird pricing. Then use code Fabric Week to save an additional €300 on your ticket. Enjoy your summer knowing your place is reserved at Europe's leading Microsoft Data and AI conference. Win Lego from Arteris. Scan the QR code to enter today for a chance to win Lego from Microsoft Fabric Week sponsor Arteris. As always, if you have any questions at any stage during the webinar, please feel free to type in the chat box and Matthias will get to them during the session. This webinar will be recorded and added to the Resource Center, where you'll be notified by email when it's available. And now I'm going to hand you over to today's presenter. Hello, Matthias. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Sean. Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure. I've been looking forward to this. It's technically my vacation time, but that wouldn't stop me from participating in this amazing Fabric Week. I'm just very much looking forward here to talking about how we can do more with agentic coding in Power BI, and yeah, I thought I'd just get started with that. So hey everyone. As we go, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them by into the chat. Sean will be so nice to help moderate that. Let's try to make this interactive and make it a discussion and a dialogue more than me having to show you 100 PowerPoint slides, which won't be the case in any way. So I'm gonna switch on my screen sharing and show my PowerPoint slides, and it's gonna be a little bit, of course, a presentation, and then hopefully a more demo heavy. Yeah. Great to see the interaction already from the chat. I can see people from various places. All right. I should be sharing my screen now, but Sean, can you confirm for me just to be sure?
Yeah, I can see your screen perfectly.
Great. Great. So we're going to be talking about agentic development for Power BI. And I will do my best to try to move away from the whole hype train regarding AI. It is difficult because it is also a pretty interesting, pretty powerful technology, but I'll try to be as down to earth as I can. And the topics I want to talk to you about here today is, well, quick introduction to the whole idea of an agentic data platform, the concepts behind agentic coding, and then some of the building blocks that I think is important when we start talking about using AI for help with doing development in Power BI specifically. So context engineering, MCPs, agent skills, and potential extensibilities with CLIs or other things. And for all of these categories, I'm actually bringing hands-on Power BI examples of where we can do something with these individual components specifically for Power BI. And to make it even more down to earth, all of these components kind of correlates to something we can help the agents do for us. So context engineering is about what the agent can see MCPs is about what it can do, agent skills about what it gets to know, and then finally CLIs or other local running pieces of software is about kind of its reach and what it's allowed to run and things like that. This is not something that will end-to-end cover everything we can do with agents, even for Power BI. There are multiple concepts we don't necessarily go in depth with. For example, agent hooks, sub-agents, agent profiles, prompt templates, so forth, so forth. So I'm covering a kind of a little bit about it, a little bit of the basics, and then more of like the first next step thereafter, like how do we actually apply this, what can we actually do. So if you're already full on working with agents and are looking for these expert advices on like how should you fine tune your setup, maybe this session isn't spot on, but I'm hoping to inspire you anyway if that is the case. But if you're only just getting started or you're considering getting started, I hope you get the maximum value out of today. That's the intention, at least. So for me, this whole journey started when I was in Utrecht in Netherlands around 3 or 4 months ago. I was doing a full day workshop on basically agentic coding for Power BI. And and at that point, I even thought that I was pretty good ahead of the field in terms of using agents. But that day actually proved me completely wrong. So what happened is we did a whole exercise. It was actually kind of cool. We made this AI race where everyone had to kind of bring up their own little personal AI agent, and it was then rated based on some objective scoring. And I thought personally that it was impossible to get about above 80 in score. But two of my participants, they just raced through that barrier and kind of hit 100% completion of this exercise, even though I, as the creator and author, didn't think that was possible. So of course I had to ask them, like, what did you do? And both of them admitted that they didn't even open the exercise. They just passed the URL to their own personal AI assistant and had that solve it for them. So for me, that was kind of an eye opener that, okay, so this whole promise of AI and of agents, well, it actually can already today outperform humans, both in terms of quality and speed. They solved this exercise faster. They did it better than any of the human participants, and even better than myself who created the exercise. But a structured exercise for a learning workshop is also probably the most ideal circumstances you could ever find for anything with AI. It has like a set structure. It has an objective way to measure its own progress, and it has this iterative nature where you could improve and continue to improve. So I'm not saying that AI will in any case be better than humans. I'm just saying that it can outperform humans, and that's, I think, is not a question anymore. But of course, only under the right circumstances. The thing is that we can help make those circumstances more right for AI, and that's some of the things we will cover in this session today. So I like to, in all my talks about artificial intelligence or AI agents, I actually like to bring it completely down to earth, almost literally, by explaining it with lawnmowers. Because I think there's a great parallel here between how daunting it is to get used to this new way of working with the help of AI and agents, and how similar technological advancements kind of had a similar, how do you say it, element of change. With lawnmowers, I think we've gone through, most of all have seen these old-fashioned lawnmowers that you have to push. They're very manual. It's very tough. I think my parents had one of those when I was brought up. It looked very cumbersome, and it required a lot of manual hard labor. Then we kind of had the next generation of lawnmowers. They were automatic in the sense that they now cut the grass themselves with a motorized way. But the process around cutting our grass is still the same. We still have to push the lawnmower. We still control in which direction it's pushing. We can do it in the old-fashioned way, which feels nicer. Still something to get used to, but it feels like more what we're used to, and that's kind of nice. And then we have the robotic lawnmowers, which kind of completely broke the game and just started doing all these sorts of chaotic patterns, driving in random directions, and it's really hard to grasp this as a human who are not used to this kind of process. for me, this is similar to when we're working with coding agents. They may write some code that we didn't envision, or they may do it in a different way, but a lot of the times they get the job done, just like the lawnmower still cuts the grass. And some would even argue that this randomized pattern for lawnmowers sometimes actually get the job done better. But even though we don't have to be part of the process directly, we still have to do something as humans in this loop, so to say. Otherwise, this robot is just going to drive up into our flower bed or into our tree. So we still have to put up the fencing or the guardrails or the controls or whatever we call them. And that is to me where our job is shifting a little bit from being hands-on, the one that's pushing the changes forward, to in the future I think we're going to be more managing these fencing that I call them, or guardrails, and we'll be more managing agents or multiple agents or fleets of agents, but then tuning what they can do and the boundaries of what they're allowed to do, which I think is why this analogy is kind of pretty spot on, because it's kind of the same thing as when we go and dig down this wire through our garden to make sure that the lawnmower stays in place. We have to do the same kind of activities for AI. When I'm working with AI, I like to think of this stair of different degrees of how much control we dare or allow to give to AI. So we have, of course, manual development where we still, as humans, are completely full on taking the whole task for ourselves. Then we have the next step that I think almost any technical person, or basically most people that I know, even non-technical, are starting doing this. So that's the whole chatting with ChatGPT or chatting with Claude, and kind of having this advisory sparring with AI. And that's fair, and that has some value, that has some merit in itself. But I'd like to say that I think the biggest value comes when you're moving one step further from that, and you start actually having it do some things on your behalf. And to that, there's even multiple levels. So pair programming is the next step, where we are sitting there with our agents and have it do some of the task for us. That could be creating relationships in our semantic model. It could be updating certain meshes. It could be bulk operations like renaming our columns, or it could be something like updating a report page or something like that. But we are still very much directly involved in the process. We're still looking at the same screen, so to say, that the agent is doing. We're working together with it live. But there are steps after that. So we also have semi-autonomous agents where we can hand off not just like a very specific task, but a whole feature or a whole part of the solution, and then it will autonomously go and develop that solution and hand us the results back, instead of us having to be part of the development process. And that kind of turned us more into to product managers or architects even, and less of direct developers ourselves. And then of course we also have full autonomous agents, where the agent will just do everything. We instead of giving it either task or giving it features or epics, we suddenly give it responsibilities. So we say, you are now responsible for this whole product, just make it work or something like that, and it can then have this responsibility. Of course, the more we move up this ladder, the more control we give away, and the less control we have, and the more risky it becomes in terms of ensuring the right results and the right quality, etc., etc. So there's something to be mindful of, that we have to kind of evaluate the risk the more control we give away. But we should also recognize that the upside, like the benefit, may also grow as we step up the ladder. That being said, every step up the ladder is kind of its own paradigm and requires its own new habits and new ways of working. And there's a lot of stuff to look into to go on this journey. Each of these, of course, comes with their own kind of tools, and all the different vendors are kind of trying to approach all the different categories. So we have, as I mentioned, ChatGPT for sparring. We have Claude, GitHub Copilot for pair programming, and then something like GitHub Coding Agents for semi-autonomous work. Codex in OpenAI has the same thing. Claude has enabled the whole Claude cloud agents to do the same thing. So that's not limited to GitHub. And then, of course, full autonomous agents, which at the current state is kind of still very early. It's still has a high degree of uncertainty, and personally not something I would recommend for production workloads. But there can be use cases. It's just the control, the security layer becomes much harder when you want to do something full autonomously, because you really have to make sure that it doesn't go in a really wrong direction, like during the night where you're sleeping, etc. All right, so that was a little bit of introduction in like general AI and stuff. So next thing is agentic data platform, skipping a little bit forward. So the way I see it, where I think we're moving and where I think ideally we should be moving is to start looking at AI as well. It's still a tool, but it's certainly a tool that works as part of our workflow, similar to our human colleagues. It won't replace the human colleagues, but it will have to be efficient, will have to work in a similar manner. So we'll see more and more of agents having their own permission sets, their own like virtual machines, their own setups, their own kind of roles and capabilities and things like that. So the way I see it, it becomes one of the different actors that are working together on what we do with data. Luckily in Fabric is kind of built around one leg, which means that it always was already were built around like common workloads, common standards of data storage, like and collaboration built in from the beginning. So personally, I don't think that putting agents into this mix is that much of a of a kind of scare off or risk. I think it fits quite nicely into the already existing picture. But of course, we need to do some new stuff to make this work to begin with. So there's a bunch of things we need to think about in the whole like landscape of everything with agents. So there's the whole agents operations, what do we do with it, how do we set up these permissions and guardrails and all of those kind of things. That's kind of a different thing, and probably something to be handled by even different departments of your organization. But it's just worth knowing that someone should handle these things. Then there are specific elements of what we already do with our data platform. So creating data outputs, serving those outputs as either traditional reporting or something like that, and then like classical human use as well. All those things that we've already been doing. Of course, we still have to do this in a world with AI and agents, but there's just a bunch of new things and new features or new use cases we should consider when we're building a data platform in the future. Some of the things that I would say is like we need to consider that AI agents will become users as well. We see that we've seen a big evolving movement of the whole conversational BI space, where suddenly AI becomes the intermediate who answers the questions instead of human analysts, and that kind of indirectly makes AI agents users of our data products as well. We've also seen a few small cases where the agent may want to query our data estate just to enhance the reasoning for some task without necessarily handing off that analysis to a user. But it's just to say that we've been used to designing these systems primarily for human users, and mostly probably in the future, human users will be part of this somehow. But agent users is just going to be there. And then, of course, in the development part, which we're looking into today, there's agentic coding. But I also like to sometimes mention that migrations, which is kind of a subdomain of coding to begin with, actually can also be heavily leveraged with AI these days. So that's worth considering as well. And then at the bottom, we have, well, the whole context of our data, things that will make everyone, human users and agent users, better at using our data. So the semantic layer, ontologies, data catalog, lineage, and all those kind of things. So what I'm trying to say here is that we're now starting on a journey in this session of kind of how do we make the first step in AI using agents. And I just wanted to say that there's a whole landscape of things we probably should be doing at some point. but that doesn't mean that each and every one of you and me have to do all of this by ourselves. I just wanted to make it clear that there are some things to consider. At the end of the day, my goal with thinking as like an agentic platform is to create a future where we as humans can define a task, but the agent kind of then can run with that task and give us some results back. I don't buy into the whole letting AIs run completely autonomous yet. I think we still want humans to be accountable and improve the workflows and improve the output of it. Anyway, I mentioned the agentic migration. Not going to talk that much about it. I just want to say that migration is an area where, because it is so structured, you often want to move something in the same form that it always already have, and the primary bulk workload is often something about translating the same business logic from one language to another language. That actually makes migration a pretty sweet business area to use agents in, and can reduce the task manifold if you do it right. So that's just the quick thing there. But let's talk agentic coding. I like to talk about agentic coding versus wipe coding. I know that often this is talked about as kind of agentic coding is the structured process where we still kind of keep the software engineering best practices in mind, et cetera, and et cetera. And wipe coding is more like let the whole thing run wild. We go and we create something where we may not even understand the code language that we're using, and we just have AIs generate things for us, and then we just validate it as users almost ourselves after the fact. So that's wipe coding is a lot more chaotic. Agentic coding is a lot more structured, and I like this divide. But I also like to think of kind of wipe coding can sometimes be seen even as this is just a higher degree of autonomy. We can actually move from agentic coding to wipe coding if we have even better guardrails. If we make sure that even if you work in a program language we don't know, we could make wipe coding work if we had the proper guardrails to protect us from the potential damage we could make by releasing some code we didn't understand. So at the end of the day, I think it's two sides of the same coin. But from a pragmatic point of view, I just like to think of this. Agentic coding is more structured. We actually approach this with some care and with some still like taking responsibility for the quality of even the code ourselves. So there are some things we can do to improve agents when we think about this from an agentic coding point of view. There's of course the model itself, and honestly, over the last half year, this is to me what has leapfrogged the most. I mean, the models we have today versus the models we had even half a year ago, that's really making a big difference, bigger difference than whatever context engineering that we could set up. In my own experience, I would say context management and proper kind of prompting and things like that can probably elevate an agent or an LLM model perhaps two like generations, or what you would call it. So with good context management, I think we can make the agents from half a year ago almost as good at some tasks as the ones from today. But the models makes a big difference. And with context, we can actually give it some knowledge, some working memory, so to say. So we can add everything from the know-how about our semantic models. We can add it our development practices. We can give it instructions of how we want it to work. We can give it examples of how we should work and things like that. And then we have connections, which is kind of what gives it access to do things outside of its local environment. So we could connect it to something like the Power BI service. We could connect it to, well, some Fabric as well. And we could connect it to even Power BI Desktop. And these connections are, well, a mix of the right permissions and the right installed software like CLIs and the right standards for the agents like MCPs to actually do these things. And finally, of course, guardrails as our constraints that make sure that the agents, even if it messes up, that we know that this is a contained risk. All right, so there's a whole black hole of this agentic knowledge engineering. And if you ever end up and find yourself in a place where you're looking at something like fine tuning LLM parameters, there's something called temperature, top P, frequency, max tokens, these kind of things. Well, then you're probably definitely too far down this rabbit hole. Also, if you're looking at like context window and analyzing that in depth, that may not be like our job. So I'm just saying that there is a whole black hole of what we can do, and we shouldn't let that scare us off. Just start out with the simple, easiest approachable things. Because if we want to control this whole context engineering and everything's going on, that's gonna kind of just become very, very, very complex very quickly. Anyway, I think actually the idea about making agents better is can be made fairly simple. So we have LLMs at the core. This is the model itself. We have the agent harness around it. This is something like Claude Code or GitHub Copilot. That's kind of the agent harness. It will do some things based on the LLM. Then we have the actual knowledge that we can give the agents, often in the forms of these days as agent skills or instruction files. Um, but also, of course, with the tools and MCPs and things like that, which will enable it to actually do stuff. So this combination of knowledge for the agent and tools for the agents, I think that is where we should focus, even as beginners. How can we make the agents do more? How can we make it do the things in the right manner? So how can we give it knowledge? How can we give it capabilities? And then someone somewhere have to think about guardrails and permissions, because of course in the chase for quick results, we shouldn't start like offering um, sensitive personal informations to LLMs that we don't know where this data is hosted or where it goes. So of course there needs to be some sort of governance in place as well. And I think in a future where we're looking at potentially multiple agents, we even have to consider different feature sets of all these things that I just mentioned for individual agents, because it may be that some agents should have some access to some systems and others should not. But that is different area. But we should think about stuff like where does our data end up? What data can be allowed in? What can the agent see? What could it potentially see if we didn't control this? Can we prove what it has already accessed or haven't? I think those are the kind of questions we should think about or bring to our IT department to think about. And there are ways to mitigate this. Let's not go into depth there that much. Anyway, getting to the whole context management. So how do we make AI better with the reality we have today? Luckily, there's a first step here. Data modeling. I mean, just creating good data models actually does a big part of the job. So if you already have good data models following the good standard, good best practices, um, suddenly AI agents will be able to recognize those much better, and that's like half of the job. There are specific features in Power BI, like the prep data for AI features, which can allow us to even elevate this a little bit further and control some smaller things there. And then, of course, also with the new ontologies in Fabric, we could add this whole additional layer of grasping our data that's not limited to the dimensional modeling of data models. Um, yeah, so there's like a lot of stuff that we can do to make AIs understand our data better. But going back to how we can then use it to actually do our development, I just want to say that this has heavily been enabled by Microsoft deciding to create the PBIP format, because suddenly the whole format of everything we do with Power BI has been turned into code. That means that we can actually now version control every changes we're making, but it also means that an AI agent can now understand those changes. So in a PBIX file, those changes would be binary at the core. So it would be just changing ones and zeros to other ones and zeros, basically. With the PBIP structure, it can actually read, okay, so it is this specific visual that has updated its width or something like that. And it can now use that to make its own changes or validate some changes.
Matthias, there's just one question in there. Someone just wondering if there is a demo in this session.
Yeah. Demo will come in just a few minutes. I just want to get
Perfect.
slides over with.
Thanks a bit.
Power BI MCP. Well, there's two different MCPs. Let's look at it in the demo instead of going through it on the slides. And that's almost it. Last slide here. When we get to the demos, you'll also be introduced to something called agent skills, which is an important part of what we do with agents these days. Agent skills has a very specific standard. So it's a bunch of folders with instruction files in them. So there's a specific way that we should name these agent skills folders. There's a specific file, the skill.md, that has to be there. And then there's potential subfolders with other stuff we could include there. And even in the skills MD, there's a very particular formatting of how we should add a name and description and how that should look. The thing is, don't fret about getting this right. Just use AI agents to actually create them instead. That's my go-to. But if you get the structure right, they actually work really, really well at giving knowledge to the agent. So it has this principle called progressive disclosure, which means that when the agents read them, they actually only start by getting the name and the descriptions, and then the agent can choose to dive deeper and say, hey, this is actually relevant to what I'm doing. I want to read the rest of the skill for my context. And then reading that rest of the skill, it can then decide to go through these subfolders and get specific scripts or references or other assets. So that's kind of this three-step progressive disclosure. Okay, I know that was a bit of a lot of heavy slides. So let's move on to be more practical and look at demos from here on. And as I mentioned, just fire away if you have any questions in the meantime. Doesn't sound like it. Okay, so the first thing I want to make clear is that when we talk about context and the whole idea here about what agents, go back to this, what agents actually see, I just want to make sure that everyone tuning in understands that at the core, LLMs are basically just word guessing or token guessing machines. Everything is based on text, and if we see them doing something that's not text, it's actually just a little bit of magic trickery that we're doing with the agent harness. But let me show you an example. So demo time. So I have here, this is my own tool I've created because I needed my own harness to do some of these demos. So in this harness, we can actually look at what goes on behind the scenes when I'm chatting with an AI agent. So in this case, I'm doing something very simple and just going to my AI agent and writing hi. And behind the scenes, what you'll actually see is that there is a bunch of text being sent back and forth between the agents and me. So this is actually the entire payload of what the agent got. All of this text is sent to the LLM, and the LLM gave this response back. And that's kind of it. As I said, it's all text, but it's structured text. So in this text, there's a structure. There's a specific system prompt that will tell it kind of what it does and what it should do. So it's a Power BI modeling assistant, what its role is. It gets the information about which skills that it has available and things like that. So in this case, for example, here's a list of available skills that you can then load to decide to load. It gets a list of the available tools that it can then also load, etc., etc. And then the actual user message. So this was just to get the point across that if we think about, oh, we need to do a lot of prompt engineering and we need to make sure that what we write here is very precise and very specific. I just wanted to emphasize that, well, managing the context is not about writing a good prompt. It's about influencing all of these other things that are sent to our AI agents through the text. And all of these other things are sent through the tools that we're using. So that could be GitHub Copilot, it could be Cloud Code, etc. So let's try to move into to GitHub Copilot for a little bit.
And someone just asked, Matthias, looks really interesting. Are you going to FabCon?
Yes, I'm going to FabCon. So if anyone's more interested, just write to me and we can have a quick chat at FabCon. No problem. But I'm not speaking of FabCon. But I will be there, of course. Okay, GitHub Copilot. I think this is where most of everyone probably are getting started, either here or Claude Code. But the principles are very much the same. So whatever we're looking at here should be transferable to the workload you may be using if you're working with Claude. The first thing I want to do in GitHub is to open a blank project, because to demo our the capabilities, we actually don't need. Oh, we actually don't need any context in the project. So here is GitHub with a completely blank project. So nothing here to think so much about. So what we actually need to do is, if we're not used to VS Code, this may be very daunting. So we start by ignoring almost everything going on to the left, and then the chat session is basically what we actually want to think about. But there is one thing we need to do. So first thing is we actually need to enable GitHub Copilot. I've already done that, but that's a pretty simple few click step. Of course, requires some sort of licensing to get started, but that's the same for any AI agents these days, almost. Then there is the extensions in VS Code where we can go and find the Power BI Modeling MCP. And the Power BI Modeling MCP, there you go. Just click on that, click install, and then that will be installed. And that's basically it. Now we just by doing these clicks, we're actually giving it an MCP, which is kind of a toolbox, and it now has the toolbox of doing things with Power BI. So I can now actually start working with this now and do things like ask it to, for example, connect to my local data model. And now we'll find local data models in my Power BI desktop and connect to it. So with demos for AI, there is going to be a little bit of downtime, waiting for the AI. So feel free to now jump in with some questions while we wait for the AI, if you have any.
Is a question in, are there any good Microsoft learnings on agentic development for PBI?
Are there any good Microsoft learnings for it? I would say in the whole thing. So right now the best learning is a mix of different like community contributors and their blog posts. I think there is a little bit. There is some on the Power BI modeling MCP on MS Learn. I would probably start there. It's a good starting point. There's a guy, Rui Romano, working for Microsoft. He's also posting some things, both officially, but also in his own like blog post and GitHub. All of that is, of course, also interesting. So I would probably start there, but I haven't found like the, how do you put it, like the agentic coding for Power BI Bible book, or like the must read or something like that yet. I think it's too early, and a lot of the tools we're using are also a little preview in nature. So the Fabric agent skills we'll look at later are also in preview. So there is an element of things are moving too fast for having like a good body of knowledge to learn. So what's happening here is that the agent is now starting working. It actually realized that it needed to run this connection operation. It's one of the tools in this MCP server. It ran that. It asked me for permissions. It will usually do that. And now it actually has an active connection to this local model. It's the same model that I have open here on my screen. So now we can do things like try to have it influence this model. So we could start with something simple like saying, okay, there's a table here. Ideally, that should have another name. So let's rename this table to products. And while it's doing its work, we can try to analyze the semantic model a little bit more. So this one has a okay, decently named columns. That's fine. Now again, it's asking for permissions. So there's a thing here in GitHub. We can allow it to do this operation here once, or I could allow it in this workspace, or I could just say always allow it. So in this case, I'm now just going to say allow all the tools from the Power BI Modeling MCP because I trust that, and I'm going to trust that for the rest of this session today. So we don't have to click this button much any longer. Give it a little bit more freedom to do its work, a little bit less control for me. Anyway, if we look at this customer table, you'll see that we still have some columns that are some old snake case or something like that. And that could be a good candidate for some bulk operation where agents can actually do things a little bit faster than I could myself. So let's try to do that next. But as you see, it's actually working on my model in real time. So it's even updated here on Power BI Desktop. So it actually now changed the table name. I could go here and say bulk update all column names in customer to be user-friendly spaced names. And luckily it should be able, hopefully it should be able to do this just as easily. All
There's
right.
another question in there, if that's right.
Yeah.
Do we have a repos for skills? Which code assistants do we use to develop, such as anti-gravity, Codex, Claude, Code, etc.?
So I had two questions. So repo for skills, and then secondly, something about.
Yeah, which code assistants do we use to develop, such as anti-gravity, Codex, Cloud Code, etc.?
So the thing is that these principles are quite broad applicable. So anything from MCPs to this concept of agent skills, it's all built on open standards that all the tool vendors are using. So whether you use GitHub Copilot or you use Claude Code or you use something third, usually the same things are transferable. So questions about like which repo should we use? Well, it kind of at the end of the day comes down to taste. Some people will make excellent repos of agent skills that works well with Power BI and share them publicly. I know of two people at least. Rui Romano does it. Kurt Bueller does it as well. And then of course Microsoft itself has released a big repo of a bunch of advanced skills specifically for agentic for the whole of Fabric. It's called Fabric Agent Skills. It's called Skills for Fabric, actually, or Agent Skills for Fabric. I'll show them in just a little bit. Okay, so now I did a bulk operation. It now updated my entire like column from these to these, and you can see it actually did it quicker than what I could have done it myself. I could also take it further and say, hey, I need you to do something that is even more cumbersome, like go through all measures, make sure that they're documented, make sure that they're properly formatted, make sure that they follow our standards, etc., etc. That's really where AI starts to become much more powerful. But I could also use it for more like deep technical things. It's just hard because right now I didn't give it any good skills to understand, for example, DAX or things like that. So it may be it could be less than ideal. See sales measure. Can you clean it up? And hopefully it should be able to write some better DAX than the one that's written here. So while it's doing this, I think we can try to move on and look a little bit on agent skills as well. So this is MCP. That is what will allow the agents to do things. But it's still just a general model with its general reasoning. It may not be very good at data modeling, and it may not be very good at DAX writing, etc. But we can make it better, and that's I think is the cool part here. So as I mentioned, there is a specific format So I need to make a folder in my project called agents or agent. In this folder called skills, and in this folder we can make a folder for the specific skills. So for example, I could make a skill called naming standard. Now in that naming standard we need, as I mentioned, we need a specific file, skill.md, and this file needed a specific structure like this thing. Actually, I'm just going to find it online and copy it.
Someone just said, hi, Matthias, it's skills for fabric.
Skills for fabric. Thank you. So specification. Now, I know that this may seem a little bit like tricky to have to go here and find a very specific format to write a skill on your own. But the trick here is actually not to do it manually, just have the agent write the skill itself. But I just wanted to show you how to do it manually so it's easier to understand. So here we have a skill name, we call it naming standard, or we could call it naming standard Power BI, whatever. And here is description. Our general corporate naming standard for how we want Power BI.
Hey, Matthias, are you still there? I'll see if Matthias is able to come back online. Sorry about that, guys. We'll see if he's able to come back online. I just sent him a message there, so I'll keep you informed. Thanks. Not sure why. I'll give it to 10 to guys, and then if he doesn't come back, I'll have to end it. Sorry about that, but you'll all receive the recording. Thanks. Okay, it looks like I have to end it here. You'll have the recording straight after this webinar, so you can view it then. I'll get back onto them and see what happened, but sorry about that, and hope you join us in the next webinar. Thanks everyone for joining.